board. So Diana, I'll leave it to you.
Thank you, Josh. And Steve, come on up. We're just going to dive right in. I think I need this. All right. We lost the big comfy chairs, so we'll stay awake that way. Well, thank you all for being here and for joining us. I'm really excited to be part of this conversation with Steve, and I have the great pleasure of getting to chat with him fairly often. Just as Josh said about Puget Sound Energy being a limited partner in Steve's fund, so is Alaska Airlines, and Steve is a very generous manager of a fund. It's not about a transactional relationship. It's about an incredibly deep relationship, because what Steve cares about is seeing these technologies grow and thrive, and seeing the communities that his LPs and partners are in grow and thrive, which is why he's with us today. So a little bit of a background on Steve. You can read his bio, but Steve is an entrepreneur. He was one of the early investors and board members in Tesla, which has got to have been an incredible experience. You can consider asking him about that later. He is a Silicon Valley entrepreneur and CEO, best known for helping take eBay public in 1998. He's a former elected official. He served as the controller and CFO for the state of California, the world's 5th largest economy, through an economic crisis, and managing oversight of the nation's 2 largest public pensions, with over $800 billion in under management. And so bringing both of those perspectives forward, Steve today is founder and CEO of the Wesley Group, which invests in clean energy and AI technologies and circular economy technologies to grow business and do it in a responsible way, and has been very successful in doing so. He's deeply involved in advancing the next generation of breakthrough companies, but also in advancing the next generation of talent. He's been a lecturer and professor at the Stanford School of Business for 11 years. So lots of incredible perspective there. And I'm excited to learn from Steve in this conversation. So some context on the background, on the situation that we're coming into, and then Steve's going to take a few minutes and run us through just a little bit of context. I'll ask him some questions, and I hope you will too. We will plan to open it up for questions either on the WHOVA platform or with a roving mic, so don't be shy. I know several of you in the audience, and I can call on people if that's what it comes down to. And as Josh knows, I have no fear of doing that. So AI is booming. The technology industry is booming. It is an industry that contributes incredibly to cultivating talent, to paying taxes, to economic development across our regions. And it is going incredibly fast. And it's incumbent on all of us to know where it's going so that we can incorporate it into our decision-making, into our business, and to know both the opportunity as well as the risks of AI. Same thing with clean energy. Incredible pace of development, incredible pace of investment. And we need to know how to understand and accelerate the right technologies at the right place in order to create the future. There's much more being built and quickly, and AI is enabling a lot of the development in clean energy. So these sectors are integrally linked. So it's incumbent on us to stay ahead of the curve, to stay competitive. And with that in mind, I'd like to ask Steve just to give us a little bit of what he is seeing in the landscape, and a few sort of thought starters, and then we'll dive into the conversation. So Steve, over to you.
Diana, thank you. I'm going to jump up just because I'm a little overly energetic in general. First, welcome this morning. We're going to be as provocative as we can. We're going to cover a ton of areas, and then we're going to do questions back and forth and throw it open to you. First, I just want to start out and say there's a lot of boohooing out there, and the Chinese are coming and cutting rates and challenges, and some people love Trump and don't like him, and all these government can work better in Washington or California. Folks, get a grip. This is the most exciting time in human history to be alive, and all of the major changes are happening right here on the West Coast. So take a look. 1965, the 10 largest companies in the world. And what do you see? 6 oil companies, 3 auto companies. When you said energy, you meant oil. And it's an era of gas guzzlers and carbon fuels. Fast forward to this month, 10 largest market cap companies in the world, none from China, none in Europe, none in, folks, New York City. 7 of the 10 largest companies in the world are right here on the West Coast. And guess what? They're all located in Silicon Valley and Seattle. We are leading the planet. So I want to talk about what's happening and how we need to do to continue that. First, I want you to get the big picture here. The revolution in AI, data centers, and the electrification of virtually all of the world's transportation fleets. Folks, cars, trucks, trains, boats, and someday even airlines, we'll talk about this, are going electric. This is creating the largest economic and investment opportunity in human history. And folks like Puget Sound, Alaska Airlines, Amazon, Microsoft, who's here, are leading this. Folks, everybody in the world is dying to exchange places with us, and we shouldn't let them. So let me show you this. I grew up in Silicon Valley. By the way, if anybody wants these slides, please take pictures. But I'll also, if you give me a card, I'll send you the whole deck, or you can do both. Every one of these technology waves, and we lead the world in technology, has been huge, and then they start to come down a little, and everybody says, oh my gosh, Silicon Valley is going away. It's all going to go back to normal. Folks, it isn't. And I just want you to know the slope of each one of these hills is bigger than the one before. And if you look out to the right, I'm going to tell you flat out, this revolution we're going to talk about today in AI is bigger than smartphones. It's bigger than the internet. It's bigger than anything any one of us has ever seen. Pay attention. Now you may say, oh, that sounds like the normal Silicon Valley hyperbole. Take a look. Companies on the right. These are some of the fastest growing firms in the world. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Take a look. None of them come close to the growth of ChatGPT. By the way, in my vintage, television was a pretty big deal. And Silicon Valley, we judge things. How long does it take you to get to 100 million users? Television, 38 and a half years to get to 100 million users. ChatGPT, anybody know? 2 months. So if you're not paying attention to this, you could be missing the next wave, and it might be tidal. Next, there is a dramatic shift globally to the electrification of utilities, using renewable energy and so on. I just want to give you a sense. China built more solar and wind and battery power last year than the rest of the world combined, ×2. To date this year, 92% of all new power added in the United States is renewable. That's what is being added today. Why? It's just cheaper. I'm going to be a little controversial here. We have 14 of the world's largest utilities as investors. There are no Marxists in this group. They're looking for the cheapest, most reliable power you can get online soonest. At the same time, China's leaping ahead. U.S. just canceled $23 billion of clean energy projects that we're going to need in our all-of-the-above strategy to keep up with this enormous demand of energy. On the mobility front, massive global move to EVs. A lot of people say, oh, that's slowing down, or I think hybrids are the future. Folks, 1 out of 3 vehicles sold in the world globally last year was electric. Sorry, 1 out of 5. 1 out of 4 this year, 1 out of 3 next year. And it's because the cost of batteries continues to go down faster than anybody dreamed. And it's now speeding up because we're moving from lithium ion to iron phosphate batteries, which is changing everything. That's leading to the next great trend, which is autonomous vehicles. Folks, 36 months ago, this is science fiction. Waymo delivered 13,000 rides in October 2023. Last October, 150,000 rides. This year, they will do 12 million rides globally. Next year, 25 million. Every one of you will be riding in a vehicle without a driver in your lifetime, most likely in the next year or two. I'm going to start to wind up here with something that every one of you should think about. And I wanted to do this for the folks at Microsoft, because they lead virtually every revolution. My whole life, every firm has been in a battle to hire the best and brightest software engineers to develop and stay ahead in the future. Microsoft, for the first time, said, we're actually shedding software engineers because 30% of our code is now being done by AI. Every other company in the room should be listening, because your job is to figure out how you can fully incorporate AI in every part of your business. So with that, let me just leave you with one of my favorite quotes from Steve Jobs. My father always said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Folks, in the 1970s, great advice. Today, throw that one right out the window. Steve Jobs' mantra for every one of you in this room is, if you are not busy obsoleting your own business, somebody else is. Get with it. So thank you. Diana, back to you.
Thanks, Steve. Those are some incredible stats. And I'm going to ask you about several of those topics. So we'll come back to AI, but I want to take a sort of pivot into energy in particular, because there's a lot of conversation about the incredible increase in energy demand that AI is driving and other trends. But one of the things is increased energy demand. You talked a little bit about the rise in renewables. You talked about China outpacing us in terms of development. And there was a piece on your slide about the number of projects that have been canceled in the United States. So we're at an interesting point where demand is increasing. In some ways, the environment is getting more challenging. In other ways, there's even more investment than ever. So I'm curious to know your take on, have we peaked? Are we going to have a more challenged next few years in terms of new renewable energy technologies or AI enablers of those technologies? Why or why not?
So let me break this into three. First, make no mistake, we're going to see the largest increase in demand in human history. No one fully knows how to deal with this. In our lives, I promise you right now, you're going to be hearing more about brownouts, shortages than ever before. Second, you heard me talk a lot about renewables, and in renewables for the short term, the next 5-10 years really are the answer. It's not because I like them, or frankly, even because they're that green. It's because they're the fastest, least expensive thing you can get out there. Next point, we support an all of the above strategy. This is like a massive competition, a football game. We need every player we can get on the field. And if you're a utility executive now, we urge you to consider getting more natural gas contracts. The rub is the people who build natural gas, GE Vernova, Siemens, Hitachi, they'll take your call and they'll get you a natural gas turbine by 2028 because they're sold out until then. Or if you're expecting brownouts in August, that's not so helpful. So at our firm, we're looking at all the new technologies that can get utilities into the field as quickly as possible. And that includes oil companies. Everybody loves to scapegoat someone else, but the oil industry is an essential part of solving this problem. Most of the major oil companies, including Shell, Equinor in Norway, are really moving quickly to do their part to decarbonize. So we need an all of the above strategy to win what is one of the most important intrinsic battles, not just in the world's history, but in America's history, because we're in a competition with China, and it's one I'd like to see us win.
What's one technology in the energy, either the energy production space or energy enablement space, that you think is either underrated or that you're particularly excited about, or you think this audience should be aware of?
So I like to be a little controversial here. You know, the things you've heard about is natural gas, and we could use more of it. And you've heard a lot about nuclear. I love nuclear. It is the long-term solution. 20 years from now and beyond, it is where the world is going. But It's not ready for prime time just yet. It takes a long time to permit. It takes even longer to build. We need to get from here to there before nuclear will save the day for us. Short term, you're going to see more solar, wind, but especially batteries than you ever dreamed. I used to serve on the board of Tesla. And in 2010, batteries cost $1,400 a kilowatt hour. And it was cool. I don't know if any of you have a Tesla Model S, amazing, but at $100,000, it's kind of a plaything for the rich. Today, battery costs are down to $80 a kilowatt hour. There are few things that you'll see in life where the price goes down more than 95% in a decade, and it's going down faster than ever, 20% last year. So a lot of people are saying, my God, Mr. Trump just got rid of the $7,500 tax credit. I think it was a mistake, but it's not going to matter much because battery costs went down 20% last year. They're going down 15% this year and for the rest of your lives, and it's happening right now. Major firms in China, BYD being the major one, but SAIC, Geely, and others, they are selling electric cars in Europe that are spiffy, fast, reliable for $18,000. And the legacy automakers, we have Volkswagen, Audi as an investor and others, they need an answer to that, and they need it now. But this low-cost battery is turning out to be a breakthrough for the auto industry and a breakthrough for the utility industry. Our job is to stop complaining. It's to see where the trend lines are going, and it's to make sure we're beating every other country in the world to the punch. We've done it so far. There's no reason we shouldn't be able to keep doing it in the future.
All right, so we already got some excellent questions coming in, but I got a few more. One, just quickly, we talked about the role of AI in increasing demand production. What role does AI play in actually energy distribution enablement, making it more reliable and available in more places?
Sure. This is a great question because for most of us, you think about energy and it's like, how many thousands or millions of barrels of oil do you have in storage? And it's sitting somewhere, and maybe there are pipelines because there's a lot of oil and natural gas pipelines, and it's ready to be moved around. But with electricity, the value of it changes by the second, by the time of day. And so what's happening, and if there's one technology to really look at, it's this thing called virtual power plants. And this is why this one is so fun. If you're a utility executive, all you care about is 99.999%, not all, but one of the major things, 99.99% reliability. You want to know what's there. But it's really expensive to build out this enormous network of power plants just to solve for the top 2 or 3 or 4 days a year of demand. And what you're seeing increasingly in places like Arizona, where they have huge heat swings, they're leaders in what are called virtual power plants, which is where you don't build new plants all the time, but you aggregate power sources that are already there, which would be solar facilities, battery aggregations, like anybody who has a lot of electric buses or even a lot of tractors or cars, like the rental car companies, they can be a huge part of the solution. Just to give you an example, PG&E down in California had a massive risk of a brownout last year, and PG&E wheeled in 350 million or megawatts of power on the hottest days of the year in July to avoid outages from a plant that didn't exist. It was virtual. It was just an aggregation of energy sources that were already there. So these are the creative things we'll be looking at the future. By the way, Puget Sound is an absolute leader in this sector, and you should just know, not every utility or every airline company are as progressive and fast-moving as the ones in the Pacific Northwest. This is not just a lucky coincidence that Amazon and Microsoft are here. This is one of the 2 global technology hubs that everybody is looking to for leadership. So when you walk out of here today, you ought to feel pretty darn proud.
So that's a great jumping off point for my next question. I talked this morning about needing to be sort of clear-eyed and looking at the future, and we have an incredible opportunity, but the moment we take that for granted, is when it will start to decline. So what are the risks that you think we need to be particularly clear-eyed about? And there's a follow-up that I'm going to ask from the audience that's about one risk in particular.
You bet. Look, it's something called the paradox of number one. Like if you're the US, you've always been the biggest economy in the world, or maybe you're Harvard or Stanford, or you're Toyota, you're the head of whatever your field is. It's easy to say we're doing great. And I think even Microsoft's been through a bit of this, where there've been a few flat years, and then all of a sudden, time to bring in a new CEO, and they kick it into the higher gear. You just have to be moving quickly to stay ahead. You can't take anything for granted. In the old days, you used to say, oh, we have a lot of IP, we're okay. Throw that out the window. It's just about who can move fastest. And the things that worry me are to see how quickly BYD has become dominant in the auto industry, because the others, no one's taken my internal combustion engine vehicle away. I love it. They're getting taken away faster than you think. So take the leap, learn to get comfortable with risk, but remember this mantra from Steve Jobs: if you're not busy obsoleting your own business, someone else is.
I thought your stats about the incredible development and rate of change in China, BYD is one example, but in renewable power production, that was a pretty startling stat, and not limited to that sector. So two specific risks. One that was raised by a member of the audience around fake, and if you wouldn't, whoever's helpfully managing this screen, if you wouldn't mind, perfect. Does the proliferation of disinformation and fake news threaten the relevance of AI and the internet? Curious your perspective on that particular risk point.
This is a great question. I think it does. AI gives us potential to do all sorts of extraordinary things, just like nuclear energy, just like vaccine and biotechnologies, but it also introduces great challenges. And I think all of you know this, but nowhere is it written that with great technology and power means there's no downsides. We need to pay attention. If you want to have an active, vibrant democracy, I don't know if any of us are doing enough to keep it. You've got to be paying attention. AI can hallucinate. There are entire groups working on ways to make sure that the machine learning algorithms will avoid hallucinations. But every company, and I've been on boards of big firms like Tesla, you have a responsibility to invest in the future, but you also have a responsibility to put guardrails up. Not to get too political, but part of the reason the US has been such an unfettered success for 250 years is we were one of the first to have a Declaration of Independence and a constitution that put guardrails on leadership. There are a few questions about, are we, you can't take that for granted. We need to make sure we pass that down to the next generation. Same thing is true in technology. I don't know of any technology, from cars to guns to nuclear, that does not have some pretty dangerous downsides if you don't pay attention. So the punchline for all of you is, especially in a democracy, you're either a victim or you're a participant. I would urge all of you to be participants. It's much better.
Thank you. It's one of the reasons I actually have always appreciated Microsoft's Copilot designation, not just because it evokes aviation and the important role that pilots play, but actually to this idea that it's not a solution to replace human intelligence. It's a solution to accelerate and, really put human intelligence in the right optimal place, and then leverage technology where it can be most leveraged. So kind of along those lines, another really controversial topic lately has been, and you alluded to it or specifically referenced it, this idea that AI is going to replace jobs. And that is particularly challenging when we're talking about wanting to ensure that everyone has a chance to benefit from opportunity. We don't want to get rid of whole classes of jobs, but what do you think that, if you think about the positive frame of that, what do you think it means about where talent is going, and what can we do to help enable talent going in the right place so that AI serves its role, so that talent continues to be strong and growing, and so that kids that are coming up into school now are looking to the right things so that they will have an opportunity to go have good jobs and take care of their families.
Oh my gosh, like Diana's asking me like the toughest questions in the world. I'm trying to give you 1 or 2 minute answers here. This is not easy.
I never said it would be easy.
Yeah. So, but I have the answer. No. So here's what I'd say to all of you. Is AI going to take jobs away? Absolutely. Yes, I guarantee it. There's no putting technology back in the bottle, but it is no different than when they came out with looms and steam engines. The challenge for every generation, and the whole takeaway for all of you, my dad fought in World War II, and this issue is drummed into me. No one gives us anything for free. It's up to each generation to make sure we are worthy of living in the greatest country of the world. I will tell you flat out, AI is going to obsolete a lot of jobs. By the way, spoiler alert, the #1 occupation in the country, driver of all sorts. And that's just going away. If you go to San Francisco today and get in an Waymo, after about 30 seconds, you will say, my God, this has happened a little faster than what I thought. Our job is to realize that at the same time that happens, new technologies enable all sorts of cool stuff, new businesses, new revenue lines than ever before. So one of our jobs as a venture firm, and we work for Alaska, we work for Puget Sound, we work for Avista in Spokane. It is not just earn a market rate of return, but it's to help you and your business think through what is the next billion-dollar revenue line for your company or your industry. I'm here to tell you, yeah, there are some dangers and threats out there, but for every danger and threat, there's another 10 huge opportunities if you just get off your butt, start thinking creatively, and are willing to take a risk or two. And that's what the Pacific Northwest and Silicon Valley are good at. Now, speaking of which, Alaska Airlines, I think, has a once-in-a-generation opportunity. You may not be aware of this. They've got the highest customer ratings. They move faster than the big three. It's probably one of the most innovative companies I've ever seen. I'd be remiss, Diana. There's amazing things going on in the aviation industry. What are your top 1 or 2 that you think would surprise people here?
Oh, thanks, Steve. I'll share a couple thoughts and then get your questions ready because I'm going to alternate between the audience and some of the excellent questions on the screen. The theme is the same as everything that you're talking about here. The rate of innovation is just not something that we've seen in generations, decades. And it's across all parts of the system, from safety improvements, reliability improvements, sustainability improvements. And in many cases, those things go together. One thing that is challenging is that a lot of the technology that is applicable to our industry either has very high capital requirements and or high regulatory, for good reason, for safety reasons, high regulatory oversight requirements. And so we need things that can drive efficiency, using AI, for example, to improve the efficiency of our operations, or better airplanes that reduce fuel burn so that we can afford to invest in some of the more capital intensive technologies and accelerate those, like sustainable aviation fuel, which is very real, it's safe, it's effective, it cuts carbon emissions, and is the #1 way to reduce the carbon impact or the environmental impact of aviation in the next few decades. But it is going to take time to scale, and it is expensive. So I'm excited about that, but I am excited about AI and fuel efficiency savers. And the way to do those things, accelerate both, I think, is to do them together. Thanks for the question. Okay, so one question from here, and then I'm gonna end with a final question. But one question from the screen, and then we'll go to the audience, is around the critical minerals needed for battery production. If we are going to meet some of the requirements for electrification and battery use that you talked about, we are going to need to increase the availability of critical minerals. What is it going to take? Do we have the capability to do that within the US and Canada? What's it going to take to do that in a way that we can, within North America, sustain the need for battery production and efficiency advancements?
So first, thank you. This is a huge question because, as I said before, battery prices are going down. They just happen to solve our biggest challenge, which is more energy supply. By the way, Tesla last year did 99 billion in revenues. Over 10% was in energy. Tesla is now one of the world's largest energy companies as well. So anytime battery cost goes down, that helps our economy. Everybody here is right to think about, do we have enough of this stuff? And the short answer is we largely do. Canada, we haven't talked enough about, is one of the world's largest supplier of all minerals, and many of the rare earth minerals. We actually have quite a bit, including lithium mines in California, and a lot of it is in Chile, Bolivia. What we need in the US is more investment in next-gen mining and refining. But here's the good news. We're getting better and better at designing rare earth minerals out of most battery production. So a lot of people are saying, oh my God, the Chinese government, and we may be in a fight over Taiwan, and they're gonna have our arm twisted behind our back. We're moving pretty quickly beyond that. And you should also know Biden's Inflation Recovery Act, that put more US battery plants in play, more recycling plants than ever. One last quick thought. Our mind, because of how we grew up, is often based on, we need oil, we just drill it, we use it once, it goes into effluent and it's in the atmosphere for hundreds of years. We need mining, we go drill it and we make a lot of electronics and we throw them in the dump and then we go do it again and again and again. The world does need to move at a certain pace towards a circular economy. And the great thing about batteries is A, we're working on smart ways to remove cobalt, manganese, and other extremely dangerous and hard to get rare earth minerals out of the process. Two, most batteries, I don't know if you know this, are 95 to 97% recyclable, and that number is going up. Now, everybody says, which company should I invest in? Here's the secret. A guy named J.B. Straubel has a firm called Redwood Recycling that is probably the global leader, but it's wildly capital intense. The gross margins are small. I wouldn't run out and invest in lithium mines or battery recycling just yet, but it will be a very important business to track in the future, and you're good to ask that question.
Okay, let's take a question from the audience.
Questions?
We've got some roving mics. Hi, Laura.
Go ahead, just bang it out. We'll repeat the question.
We've got a mic on its way to you.
So now you can ignore it now you can ignore it on there. But so at a speech recently, Brad Smith talked about how generative AI can now do basically everything he did as a first-year associate. Brad Smith, president of Microsoft, lawyer. I get asked that question, and I tell this story, and people say, "Who's Brad Smith?" So I've learned to say that. But then he said, "But if you don't need first-year associates, how do you get second-year associates?" And that question is being, and he does not have an answer. That question is being asked about software developers, and I think there are probably a lot of other professions where that is being asked as well. And I would love to hear your perspective on that question.
You bet. There's a quick 1, 2, 3 here. First, Brad Smith is one of the smartest people I know. I have read his book. I just want you to know we're sitting around in Silicon Valley reading about people like Brad Smith and Satya. Second, there are going to be challenges here that we need to work out, just like we did when automobiles came and electricity and everything else. What I would say is artificial intelligence really unlocks the central challenge of education, which is that if you lived in Bellevue or Palo Alto, for terms of education, you're really set. Great public schools, great universities, woohoo. The other 95% of the world, not so lucky. What artificial intelligence does is give you a chance to train everybody and get everybody to an equal playing field. A lot of what we invest in, and we're kind of an energy, mobility, smart buildings company today, what a lot of our LPs are asking us for is which companies help us educate our workforce, our maintenance teams, assembly line people, to use all these new technologies faster than others and gets them up and going on the new technologies. So I think AI for sure has some challenges, but the upside is far greater. But you got to pay attention and you got to have a game plan to make it all work. But expect there to be a revolution in ed tech as well as energy and mobility.
I like that idea of a training accelerant rather than a training replacement or, something that actually skips a whole step. I think that's a really important framing. Okay, I'll go back to one on the screen here. With tech companies spending more on investment overseas than the US government does domestically, how can we attract more private investment for North American production of goods?
Wow. This is one of the tougher, most vexing questions out here. What are the most important things a government can do? And it's what we did so well in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, is invest heavily in R&D. That is largely what made Boeing, what made Intel, what made Hewlett-Packard. That is essential. Certain administrations are pulling back on that, and you pay a big price 10 or 20 years down the road. Don't do that. We do need to bring more private investment in. By and large, American companies are amongst the leaders in reinvesting in new technologies because every executive in Silicon Valley knows they only stay ahead as long as they're investing in R&D. There's also one other point you didn't mention, and I just have to say it. What makes the United States and Silicon Valley and Bellevue and Seattle so successful is we are a magnet for the best and brightest people around the world. Over half the companies that go public every year on NASDAQ are taken public by immigrants. Our job, in my opinion, is that we continue to be a haven for the best and brightest people, bring them here, give them the risk capital to start companies. That's the way you lead in the 21st century. We just need more elected officials that understand that.
Steve, as you were talking, I'm going to be a nerd for a second. My undergrad degree is in chemistry, and I remember not a ton of it anymore. But one concept that always comes back into my mind is in a chemical equation, there's always an activation energy that is required to get the thing from parts into the product that you're trying to create for the chemical reaction to actually happen. And there's something very similar, I think, in tech development, right? You actually need, and you need government to help drive that activation energy so that private investment and natural commercialization can take off. And it's policy and talent as two of the really critical elements. And so I think that's a role that government can play. But I like your framing. So that's your chemistry lesson for the day. Okay, another one from the audience. Yes, over here.
Thank you. As a former VP of Apple for the creative markets worldwide, and now as a senator, what can we do about protecting intellectual property in the age of AI?
That is a question I do not have a great answer for. I will just tell you this whole concept of we're going to have AI and it's going to cost a lot and we're going to own it forever. It's slowly going away. Not completely, not overnight, but it's increasingly becoming who can move the fastest, not who can own one space on the board and not let everybody else touch it. And that's just going to be a reality. The cycle for developing new drugs is going to shrink dramatically. The cycle for coming up with new battery chemistries is going to shrink. And there are probably some patent attorneys here that are going to come and take me out after this. But the world is going from how can you make sure that no one gets into your closed system to how quickly can you have open systems and can you outrun the other person? Even China now is developing open systems for their technologies. They have the same problem because they used to take technology from the wealthier countries, by the way, just like we did to Britain. China did it to us. Now others are starting to do it to China. It's just the way of the world. And it's not going to be easy to put that one back in the bottle. Pardon?
Music and art.
Music and art, my God. So this is a tricky one because you want to have licensing rights for artists. You want to preserve people like that. There was just a fabulous interview on NPR this last week, which funding was just taken away from, where they had a professional musician, someone who wrote jingles and got paid for it for commercials and things like that. And, you know, the classical musician, but managed to find a way to make a living and be creative, which is what he loved. And at first he was horrified with AI. And then he realized he'd written a mini jingle, kind of the first half, it was good, but not great. And he asked AI to improve it. And it took what he'd done and made it 2 or 3 times better. You can hear a lot of stories like this. I'll just tell you one other. I grew up in Silicon Valley. And I remember like yesterday, because I was sort of a math nerd, a thing called the HP 12C came out, and it was the most amazing calculator ever. And every teacher in high school said, my God, students will never be able to do addition or multiplication again. We need to take these devices of the devil away from them. Well, the same thing happened with the internet. You know, fast forward 40 years, I'm teaching on the faculty at Stanford's Graduate School of Business, and I get this seething email saying, do not let the students use AI. It is cheating. No one's going to write a paper. This is the end of academia as we know it. We might as well be closing the doors at Stanford. And it's like, take a breath. Now, and it's only taken 3 years to get from there to here, I tell all my students, we're trying to solve the most vexing problems in the world. The one of which we work on in my course is, how do you get the developing countries in the developed world to come up with a grand bargain so we can get India, China, Indonesia to stop polluting as much and help them with the resources to get to a greener world. Gee whiz, if we can answer that problem sooner rather than later using AI, we damn well better get started.
There's a question at the back.
Hi, Shane Getz, an MLA from Alberta. Really appreciate the conversation. I was at a presentation a couple of years ago over in Portland that scared the bejeebus out of me. Now, here's the thing with our generation coming up and all of this. One of the solutions for the energy issue that they were seeing at the time was, now there's this new thing because we needed to figure out the energy solution. It was wetware. And Final Spark, I think, was the company out of Switzerland or somewhere over there that was looking at using basically human tissue, so brain cells, to develop AI and do that. So as a legislator, I'm all good with the firmware, I'm all good with silicon and everything else. Where do we reconcile with legislation, with allowing the advancement of the AI and the tools and figuring out all the challenges and problems, or some of those areas, the corners that we shouldn't go? So it's kind of an open-ended question for you to offer us some guidance of, maybe there's areas or guardrails we should have, or if there's dark corners we shouldn't go into, and maybe leave some of those developments not for private industry, but for groups like DARPA or others that kind of keep things, to keep us very competitive in a global sense.
Do you want to repeat that? Maybe throw in a word too. I've got a couple ideas, but why don't you restate the question for everybody?
Sure. So I think bottom line, there's a question about kind of what might be, and I don't know if anybody's read The Coming Wave, there's this idea of containment and the question of, is containment even a viable thing? But in particular, are there parameters around what we should be advancing in AI, or things that we should be leaving to government or DARPA, et cetera? Any guidelines or kind of advice that you have for us?
Yeah. So one answer is, stop going to Portland. Sounds scary. Here's a better answer. You've got to have guardrails. I'm proud to be an American. I think our great democratic experiment leads the world, but Hitler was elected in a democratic election. Democracy doesn't solve everything. You still have to pay attention. I come from Silicon Valley. I will tell you, a lot of my favorite companies in social media have been remiss, absolutely derelict in providing basic guardrails for young people, teenagers, as well as for spreading myth truths about basic medicine, vaccines, and just falsehoods. We have a responsibility to make sure that freedom of speech is important and protected, but it is not absolute. All of these things need guardrails. And then we come to AI. And as I showed you before, now we're like in the toboggan going down hills at 80 miles an hour. We really need to have some brakes. And I would just say, as an elected official, I applaud you for just beginning to think about this. I would urge you to go to the world's largest technology companies and challenge them to tell you what they think are the right guardrails in their industry, and for you to decide whether it is enough or whether we need more, because you have a job now. It's probably the toughest time to be an elected official, to make sure we protect the public from some of the most worrisome challenges ever, not the least of which is people can use artificial intelligence to develop bioweapons, nuclear weapons. There's never been a more important time to be paying attention and understanding this next wave of technology. It's going to affect every one of you in this room and your children.
Steve, I think that's good advice. And, maybe one takeaway for all of us is just the imperative to be awake, alert, educated, and ready to act to make sure that we are managing this opportunity in the right way. So we're all going to go back. I know we're just about at time. We're all going to go back after a few days here to our states and communities and provinces, to our teams, back at the office, to our constituents. What would you encourage us to go back and actively talk about and try to problem solve in the spheres of influence that we have locally, as well as this great cross-functional dialogue today?
Wow. Well, so let me leave you with this. When I was state controller, we had an energy crisis. Everything comes back to energy. Our governor was recalled overnight, and overnight, I found myself working for an Austrian bodybuilder named Schwarzenegger. And I was just with him in Vienna, and we were talking about solving global warming at the Austrian World Summit. And he just stood up there and said, it's like only Arnold can do, it's time to quit whining. You've got to pay attention. You want big muscles, you got to go to the gym. You want your democracy to work, get involved, run for office, vote, pay attention. No one's going to give it to you. That's what we didn't understand in Austria when my father joined the Nazis. You have to pay attention. So what I would say, if you're running a company, you need to not just say, oh, here's the directive on AI. Everybody on your team needs to be paying attention. You need to find ways to create incentives for everybody in the company to be using AI. You need to challenge everybody in the company to think through how we have the right guardrails and the protections for our customers, but also to maintain the employees. And we might lose some employees. You need to acknowledge that, but then figure out, aren't there new places where you can re-engage them? And if you're in public service, you're going to need to use AI to find better ways to provide services. In California, we're the richest state in the country by a lot, and we're 39th in reading and 43rd in math. Well, that's just a disgrace. So we're going to have to use AI to provide better services. But I'll leave you with this. There's never been a more exciting time to be involved, with more opportunities. And the Pacific Northwest and Silicon Valley are leading the entire planet. Let's keep that going. Thank you.
Steve, thank you for sharing your insights. Thanks for the awesome Arnold impression.
Thank you.
And thanks for being with us today. So I'm going to hand it back to Brandon. Thank you.